We now move on to our final session of the day, where we'll be discussing impact through innovation. Let's take a look.
To achieve UN SDG targets and leave no one behind, it is essential to close inequality gaps. How do we improve economic outcomes for all? Deploying sustainable solutions in the most remote communities brings residents improved livelihoods, economic prosperity, higher standards of living. Building resilient and inclusive communities ensures a brighter future for everyone.
We would now like to welcome Jim Stenman back to the stage, and joining him are our esteemed panel of Nicole Isepi, Managing Director for Global Energy Innovation, Bezos Earth Fund, David Pong, CEO of Waterome, and Guillermo Pepe, founder and CEO of Mammotest. Please join me in giving all our panelists and Jim a warm welcome.
Thank you, everyone. So this session is called Impact Through Innovation, and we're going to highlight how organizations, both small and large, are coming together to provide sustainable solutions to communities around the world that are in need. Being joined by Nicole Isepi, Managing Director of Global Energy Innovation at the Bezos Earth Fund, and David Pong, CEO of Waterome, and Guillermo Pepe, founder and CEO of Mammotest. Very excited to have you here today. You're all making quite the impact when it comes to innovation across different scales. I'd like to start with you, Nicole. I know that the Bezos Fund is a new philanthropy, and you're in the early stages of operation, and I believe there's some 10 billion that's been allocated and going to be spent leading up to 2030, I believe. What are some of the initiatives that you're most excited about?
Yes, certainly, and maybe just a little bit of an introduction, because we are fairly new. So Jeff Bezos set up the Bezos Earth Fund in the belief, and so is all us as directors of the fund, that this year is a decisive decade. We really need to accelerate the transition of both energy and the industry in terms of achieving our targets. And so in light of that, Jeff has given $10 billion as an initial endowment, 100% grant, hence not expecting any returns, to really look at what are the issues that are slowing down that acceleration. Where are the gaps, where are the barriers, and how can we, particularly in philanthropy, be a co-partner in the industry to help with that acceleration? But in terms of technology innovation and that, there's always such amazing things, but it is no secret. The speed and scale of the acceleration, both in energy and industry, is not going at the pace we need to. So there's some great technology innovation, and I would say sort of at a macro level, it falls into like two categories. One in this decade is further advancement of the existing solutions we see to optimize the efficiency and performance of them. And the second is the new technology. The new things dealing with the gaps and the issues that we really don't have any solution or sufficient solution as of today. And they're exciting for this decade. So you'll see things like advancements for the solar, the wind, the floating offshore wind with wind islands. You'll see carbon capture, which has to be part of this discussion as well. You'll see advancements in terms of software for managing grids, as well as making sure you've got 24/7 renewable and tracking that sufficiently. You've also got e-fuels and synthetic fuels. We're very excited about it, the Bezos Earth Fund, including hydrogen. And obviously the decarbonisation of hard-to-abate industry, so green steel, green cement and shipping. You will see that being advanced through technology innovation this decade. But there's one particular thing I have to say both the Bezos Earth Fund and myself personally is very excited about. And that is looking at technology as a way to solve multi-industry or multi-issues. And so basically looking at technology that can solve various issues at the one time. So let me give you an illustration of what my thoughts are. For example, agriculture. agriculture leads to about 23% of global emissions. 50% of land around the world is used for some form of food production. However, this is not being addressed at the sufficient level that it needs to. So what we're very excited about is how can we look at this, particularly in the food and agriculture industry, and look at it through the eyes of climate and renewables. IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, has just recently launched a new program called Renewables for Adaptation, for improving livelihoods. And one of those pillars is on agriculture. So it's about looking at, for example, net zero farming machinery, biofertilizers, looking at technology that is addressing multiple issues to try and address with that acceleration of how we can move this transition further at a quicker speed.
And is it challenging to bring those technologies to developing countries in particular?
Well, before I answer that, there's actually a first step, and I think it's a step that needs some addressing. And that is that there's a real challenge. There's some amazing startups, amazing entrepreneurs, amazing ideas. But how do we catalyse that to market scale? And that is something at the Bezos Earth Fund, we, with various people in the industry, we're looking to work together and discuss and find better solutions of how we can get it to scale. But to your specific question about Africa, yes, it is true. And that's something that we are also, through some of our initiatives, such as GAP, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, which was something we launched just recently as co-partner with both Rockefeller as well as IKEA Foundation, is really looking at how we can help that, particularly in the developing countries, such as Africa and Southeast Asia.
Brilliant. David, I'd like to turn to you very quickly. I know that your journey started some 10 years ago in terms of what you're doing today, and it really showcases how technology can be life-changing. Can you take us back and just share your evolution over the past decade?
Yeah, sure, I would love to. So, just an introduction, what we do at Waterroom is we are tackling the global water crisis where 2 billion people are facing the need to be forced to drink contaminated water from surface water sources. And oftentimes this leads to waterborne diseases like diarrhea, dysentery, and even premature death. So having realized this about 8 years ago, as I was about to graduate from university, I felt that this was so important for us to tackle. Otherwise, we're continuing to go on without resolving this situation for 2 billion people, which is almost 1/4 of the world, without leaving them behind while the rest of the world progresses. So together with my co-founders, we started Waterroom with the intention to develop water filtration systems that are decentralized, that are portable, easy to be deployed, simple to use and simple to set up, and even can be independent from electricity. So we went on a journey to find what is the real design that would be effective out there in communities. I think one of the first few mistakes that we made were we brought a lot of assumptions to the table. We went to communities in our neighboring region. I'm based in Singapore, but in Singapore we don't have this issue of the lack of safe water, but in our neighboring region there are a lot of countries that do face this condition. So we would go to these communities and we would spend time trying to understand the problem, but perhaps we didn't understand the problem deep enough. So we would take a 2-week trip, 3-week trip, and then immediately come back, start to do something in the laboratory, start to design something, and bring it down the next time. So we started off with big systems, complicated systems with a lot of tubings, hose, and all that jutting out of the system. And we brought it down, and we expected the locals to use it. We'll teach them a 10-step process, and even print out the piece of paper and stick it there, and expecting them that they can read it. But unfortunately, this is not the case. Innovation always requires adoption in order to be applicable in the long term for its sustainable usage. So we found that eventually it was just obsolete because the people didn't understand how to utilize it. They were just found it too complex and figured that this was not worth the time to continue. And therefore, our first 20 prototypes ended up like this. Each time we went down on the ground, we tried something, it just wasn't adopted, and we had to go back to the drawing board.
And how much time did you waste on coming in with your own assumptions? And at what point did you realize that you had to almost unlearn what you expect it to be the case and then just open and listen to the communities?
I think it was the first 6 months of going down and just trying something new without actively listening. And 6 months later, we realized listening and having empathy, as many of the speakers have been talking about, that's very key. And so when we switched that approach, our trips down were no longer about thinking about how should I solve this, but it's about sitting down, spending time, listening to what the local women have to say, because usually the women are the ones in charge of finding safe drinking water for the family. And we would spend time talking to them and even just looking and observing, witnessing how do they go about their day-to-day lives. So it wasn't until we did that the aha moment came when we saw somebody pumping his bicycle with a bicycle pump. And we got inspired from that because it was so intuitive. It was an action that was universally understood. And so we were inspired from that to create our flagship product today, which is a bicycle pump-inspired water filtration system.
Excellent. And where are you with the product now?
We're thankful that we have been able to bring our product to more than 40 different countries, serve 250,000 people in developing regions, disaster-hit regions, including some of the refugee situations and humanitarian crisis situation like the Ukraine war currently.
Well done.
And is it people that are experiencing conflict? Would you say that that's an area where you feel that the company has had the biggest impact?
I would say that's 50%, 50%. 50% for rural and remote communities. And that's really why we name ourselves Water Roam, because we wanted to bring safe drinking water to be roamed around the world. So remote communities, hard-to-reach communities are 50% of our portfolio. Another 50% are disaster-hit regions affected by floods or humanitarian situations.
And just broadly speaking, I think a lot of people will be surprised that water access remains such a big challenge in 2023. What are your reflections on that?
I think you're absolutely right. Like, with so much progress, now we're talking about AI and ChatGPT, and so much has already been progressing with the rest of the world. Why is it that this problem is still quite prevalent? I think it has to do with the political view. Sometimes it's not as high for the issue of water. Priority tends to be more on other sectors rather than water. And because maybe these communities are so remote, so rural, it's really hard to take existing solutions that are working for the rest of the developed world to be applied. So there isn't a lack of solutions. There are many solutions out there. But the issue is, can we take the same solutions to be applied in such locations that are hard to reach? Not really. We have to find new ways to solve challenges in these developing communities.
And what surprised you the most throughout this journey that you've been on?
I think what surprises us is that we really have to, like what I was saying is listen and having so much empathy for local people. Without that, we just can't progress. Without that, we are making too much assumptions on the ground, and we're not progressing in our development of innovation. So innovation must really come with a heart that we are there to understand and journey with them through the long run. It's a marathon. We find that social enterprise is a marathon.
Excellent, thank you. Jim, I'm quite interested in learning more about Mamotest and the experience that you had in terms of taking it to the market, because you are having an incredible impact on the health of women in particular.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was a long journey. We are drastically reducing breast cancer mortality in Latin America. We started about 9 years ago, and it all started in a conversation with my father. My father is a medical doctor specializing on breast imaging diagnosis. He told me he was frustrated because women were arriving late to his office. So he wasn't able to save their lives, and he was a doctor for 50 years, and he was just telling them that they were going to die. So that really caught my attention, and I decided to start doing a research on why women weren't able to have early diagnosis. to me, before that, I was living in Europe for 10, 12 years. So for me, it was something like really normal to get access to healthcare. But I found out that it wasn't in developing economies. So as I decided to do that research, I found out that there were so many barriers that were distancing women from having access to early diagnosis. If women have access to early diagnosis, 98% of them would save their lives. And we're talking about breast cancer. Breast cancer is the #1 cancer in the world. 700,000 women die every year because of breast cancer. 70% of those deaths are in developing economies. So we found out there were mainly 4 barriers. There were lack of technology, disease infrastructure, lack of mammography units in the territory, lack of medical doctors. Usually medical doctors, specialized medical doctors, are in big cities, so the rest of the country lack that kind of medical doctors. Lack of education. Maybe women don't know that they have to go for a mammogram yearly once they are 4 years old. And of course, lack of legislation that encourage women to go for a mammogram, right? So taking into account that landscape, we started developing a telemedicine solution. So, and we thought that was going to be the solution, right? In the beginning. We started connecting mammography units to medical doctors in big cities so they would do the interpretation in less than 24 hours, instead of maybe 6 to 9 months that was taking at the time for a woman to go from trying to do a mammogram to really having a diagnosis. We, as I said in the beginning, we thought that was the solution, and we were okay with that. But then we found out that that was only the beginning we were just seeing the tip of the iceberg of the problem, and there were so many other problems that we needed to solve. We thought because we were a small company, we didn't have to do it. Like government should do it, maybe big companies should do it, but then we realized that no one was really taking care of that, of the rest of the problem. And that the problems were that women would come back with a diagnosis and ask us, what do I do with this? Now I know that I may have breast cancer, but I need to do some extra medical tests like breast ultrasound, biopsies, visit an oncologist, get a treatment, and I'm not able to do that. So we were really like worried about how could we solve that, because we were just opening a door, and they weren't able to get to a treatment on time. So we were in the same situation.
Does that relate to what David said in terms of entering with a bunch of assumptions because
Exactly.
you're not living in those communities?
Exactly. So that is when we really understood the whole picture. We started developing technology in order to follow up those women, not just giving them the diagnosis, but following them up until they get the treatment and they end the treatment successfully. And that platform allows us to have 100% traceability of those women, and really not just giving them diagnosis, but knowing that they are going to be alive, right? Saving lives, actually. That took us 9 years, to get there. And this is why I always think that technology is key, is important, but it's only part of the equation, right? We need to really understand the problem. Many times when I speak with startups, entrepreneurs, even companies in the developed world, like in Europe, in the US, they would say, yeah, I have this technology that is going to be breakthrough technology and it's going to revolutionize healthcare and it's going to solve everything. And I always say, how are you going to get with your AI solution, for example, to people in developing countries? And they're like, what do you mean? Like, they are connected, right? No, they are not connected. So we got to get there. So technology, as I said, is part of the equation, but then you have to know how to implement it. I always say that technology is here, but it's not evenly distributed yet. So we have to see a way to distribute it and to democratize access to quality health care.
And a lot of those people that are lucky enough to be on mobile devices, they don't necessarily have access to enough data. And that creates a big challenge, I think.
Totally. Data, it's key. Actually, there is an inflection point, right? It's 2020, the pandemic, COVID. Until the pandemic, healthcare was really behind every other industry in terms of acquiring and using technology and getting the data, the evidence, in order to develop drugs, medical equipment, and treatments. With the pandemic, there was a huge inflection point, and healthcare started to acquire and implement that technology and to use that data. Right now, the healthcare is it's heading towards evidence-based medicine, which is going to change the medicine as we know, the healthcare as we know it. Until now, it's been a sick care, I call it, because we call it healthcare, but what is the system is waiting for you to get ill in order to take care of you. And that's very efficient, and we lose so many lives in the process. Right now, we are in this transition to using data in the way we have to use it, smart, in order to improve the design and development of drugs, of medical equipment, and of course, of treatment. And we can, as I said before, we can follow patients throughout the entire patient journey, and that allows us to save lives.
Nicole, your big boss is one of the wealthiest men on the planet, and I think we really have to applaud these efforts through the Bezos Fund. I'm wondering, what does success look like in 2023 and leading up to 2030?
Yes, certainly. So we're very excited, the Bezos Earth Fund, and I think philanthropy in general is such a special time for us to be part of the discussion for climate change and addressing the energy and industry transition. So for this year, and particularly with COP being hosted here in the UAE, we're very excited to be part of, with the public and private sector, collaborating together to be part of that solution and the acceleration of actually the execution. Not including the discussion, but more than the discussion. We've really got to all step up together. But this year, there's lots of things to be excited about. We made a commitment just earlier of $3 billion just focused on nature, which is focused on conservation, reforestation, as well as food systems. So we'll be looking to execute more of that and sort of issue more grants in that area. We're also very proud of our Systems Change Lab. This is a project we do with the World Resource Institute. It tracks 50 transitions that must be executed in this decade. And it also tracks them where the tipping points are. The data is freely available, so I do highly recommend you and your colleagues to have a look at this. But what we're very excited about is we've only just launched it last year. We're going to continue it this year, and we're very happy to offer it as a source for this year in lead up to the COP as well. But in addition to that, it's not just looking at the data and doing the analysis. It's about us with our partners, both public and private sector. Where are the solutions? How do we take it to this next step and actually get some real executions through pilots and really sort of market to scale solutions? The other thing is obviously with our other initiatives like GAP that I mentioned earlier, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. We're very excited about that. That's unique. It's philanthropy, so it's us, Rockefeller and IKEA Foundation coming together and creating an alliance. And this is that special element of what GAP has. It's an alliance with many MLAs around the world. It's got IFCs, World Bank, ADB. It's got 25 and it's growing. It's got experts such as IRENA, International Solar Alliance, RMI. It's coming together and really thinking about how do we change the business models and how do we get more execution through innovation, especially addressing the developing worlds through metro grids, distributed renewable energy. How do we reduce that cost of renewables to Africa so they can increase their development? But also, you may have heard, we launched it in Sharm last year, and we've just had an announcement 2 days ago, is about our ETA program, which is the Energy Transition Accelerator. It's an initiative that the Bezos Earth Fund is very proud to be part of with the Rockefeller, as well as the US State Department. And it's actually really tapping into the private capital to really find a way to really activate carbon markets as a way to support the financing to accelerate that. So just yesterday we have announced, and it's public information, a global expert committee to help us design this. And we'll be working very hard this year on the design of it with the aim that come close or around the time of COP, we'll be announcing that to really sort of launch that as another tool for the industry.
Excellent. Guillermo and David, one question for both of you. I think there's this perception, and it's not necessarily something I agree with, but there is a perception that impact-driven businesses are often considered just social and not necessarily a real business in a sense. This is obviously something that the two of you disagree with, but do you have any reflections on that perception?
Oh, sure. And it is like that. Actually, that's what many people think. In the beginning of our journey, I remember people asking me, what you doing with your NGO? I was like, no, this is a company. This is not an NGO. I mean, we have a purpose. We want to save lives, and we also have a business. And it was hard to explain that to people in the beginning. I mean, I'm speaking about 10 years ago. Right now, it's more understandable. I mean, people start to see it more clearly with what's a social impact company is. And sometimes, what I usually think about that is that even if in the future social impact are going to be all the companies, in my opinion, it's going to be a must for a company to be social impact, to have social impact. Today we are in a transition where we, or at least we at Mamotest, when we are raising money, for example, we feel that we have a lot more pressure, more things to prove. Not that it's just a business, but that it's also having a social impact. And sometimes, you know, when I'm speaking to funds, after the business due diligence, I go like, okay, now you have to do a social impact due diligence, but okay, but that is what we do, you know. I mean, this is business as usual for us. It's not something that that we don't know how to do, or we can measure that on a daily basis, and we can show you what we've done. But
and just quickly on that as well, is there a friction? How do you navigate the friction between saving lives and running a business? Because you have to navigate both of them.
Yeah. For us, it's natural. That's what I'm trying to explain here. For us, it's very natural because we were born with that purpose of saving lives, and then we started to look, how do we do this sustainably financially? So then it became a business. So what we do, it's always with everything we do, it's always with having in mind that we want to save as many lives as possible, and it also has to be a business to attract funds in order to keep growing and scaling and reaching more and more women globally.
And David, is that something you recognize, the same narrative?
Yeah, definitely. I fully agree and echo what Guillermo said. We're always finding that it's a challenge, that sometimes there's a preconceived notion about how social impact or social enterprises may not be as professional as a usual commercial entity. And this is something that we have built into our value system to tackle. We have 3 values that are in our company, one of which that we tackle this is to ensure that we have excellence in our delivery, because we want to show that even though we are a social enterprise, even though that many of my team, I would like to say that I feel like I look young, but many of my team are actually younger. Majority are just out of university and in the range of late 20s. So we may look like we're not professional, but we have to show through our work and through our ethos and how we do things that, and in the end, we are committed to delivering excellence. And so that's why we built this into our value system, and we aim to tackle this preconceived notion that we're not professional.
and you're obviously having a significant impact as well. You both have won prizes here at the Zayed Sustainability Awards. What advice can you offer the next generation that's also looking to have a social impact through their businesses? Both of you.
Okay. Well, I'm very. Sometimes I kind of envy, the next generation, because they are going to start with this environment of awareness of what social impact is and the need for companies or for businesses to solve the biggest problems, the biggest social problems there are. So sometimes when I think about that, I say, oh, I would love to have had that opportunity of starting a business with this kind of environment where you can have these kind of events and meet people that speak your language in some way because they all understand what you are talking about. So I would say just seize the opportunity, take this opportunity, be a missionary, not a mercenary. Go for a mission, go for a purpose in life, and you can also make money by solving the biggest social problems in the world. So yeah, take that opportunity.
And David, final word.
Yeah, for me, I think it's don't afraid to start, because if you have that passion will allow you to keep persevering through the challenges, even though you may not be heard from the beginning. But if you keep speaking out, keep voicing it up, I think we shouldn't underestimate the power of our voices and our collective voices. There will be unity eventually when you find that common platform for many of those that are coming together to voice out your opinions on what the area that you're challenged and you're trying to tackle. Eventually, there will be community that comes together to support each other. So I think it's important not to be afraid to start.
Brilliant, and congratulations on both of you for winning those awards. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for having us, and Nicole, thanks for being with us as well.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.